On any given day in South Asia, a young woman could be going about her usual routine, strolling to the nearby shops, running errands for her family, or simply walking home from school. The backdrop seems ordinary, but in a fleeting moment, everything changes. The piercing screech of car tires pierces the air, breaking the tranquility of the scene. Men in military attire emerge from the vehicle, their expressions stern, their movements swift and purposeful. It matters not if the woman is fully grown or a mere child in her school uniform. She becomes the target of their aggression. Without warning, they descend upon her, beating her mercilessly and forcibly, dragging her into their vehicle. The car roars to life, tearing away from the scene, leaving behind bewildered witnesses who can only grasp the gravity of what has just occurred. In that moment, those women have no inkling of the fate that awaits them, of how their lives are about to be irreversibly altered. The overwhelming majority of them will effectively cease to exist as they once were. For these women, and countless others across South Asia and beyond, the horrors of being forcibly subjected to sexual slavery by the Japanese army during the 1930s to the end of the war will forever haunt their existence. The pain they endure will linger with them, shadowing their every step, even if their stories remain deliberately ignored for decades on end. Welcome to Time Capsule, where today we delve into the heart-wrenching fate suffered by the comfort women of World War II. What is a comfort woman? The chapter of World War II that stains history with its inhumane cruelty is marked by the existence of comfort women. From 1932 until the war's tumultuous end in 1945, the Imperial Japanese Army callously coerced women from occupied territories and their own homeland into a life of sexual slavery. These unfortunate souls were forcefully transported to brothels, euphemistically referred to as comfort stations, where they were stripped of their humanity and reduced to mere objects of pleasure for the insatiable appetites of Japanese soldiers. Recruitment, if one could even call it that, was a far cry from any legitimate process. Women residing in Japanese-occupied territories often fell victim to abduction, torn away from the safety of their homes and thrust into the clutches of a harrowing existence. Deception played its sinister role as well, as women were lured with false promises of nursing positions or other legitimate employment opportunities. Those who dared to question or resist their captors were met with threats of violence, leaving them with little choice but to succumb to their bleak fate. The overwhelming majority of these women, forced into the abhorrent life of comfort women, hailed from Korea, the Philippines, or China. Once confined within the walls of their assigned brothels, their bodies became mere instruments of pleasure, subject to the whims and desires of their captors. Every semblance of autonomy and dignity was mercilessly stripped away, replaced by a ceaseless cycle of forced sexual encounters with the soldiers who held them captive. Why comfort women? As a grim harbinger of the atrocities that lay ahead, the establishment of comfort women served a disturbing purpose: to fulfill the twisted sexual desires of Japanese army soldiers, following a horrifying international incident. It was in December of 1937 when the Imperial Japanese Army unleashed a 6-week-long reign of terror upon the city of Nanking in China, leaving the world aghast. However, it was not solely the brutal violence that shocked the world. It was the unfathomable sexual violence that accompanied it. During those harrowing 6 weeks, an estimated 20,000 to 80,000 Chinese women fell victim to rape at the hands of Japanese soldiers. This event would forever be etched in infamy as the Rape of Nanking. Legend has it that Emperor Hirohito himself was deeply disturbed by the tarnished image of Japan that emerged in the wake of the Nanking atrocities. As a response, he issued orders for the expansion of comfort stations throughout the territories under Japanese occupation. The purported rationale behind this directive was to curtail further instances of violation and to mitigate the spread of sexually transmitted diseases. The concept behind these military brothels was to provide an outlet for the soldiers' sexual urges, keeping them sated in isolated quarters and theoretically preventing instances of rape. It becomes evident that an entire system built upon sexual slavery was never intended to alleviate the suffering, but rather to perpetuate it. The extent of it. Under the direct order of Emperor Hirohito, the abhorrent practice of forcing women into prostitution as comfort women became an expansive operation spanning the occupied territories. The sheer magnitude of the women subjected to this degrading fate is nothing short of staggering, with estimates ranging from a minimum of 20,000 to a chilling high of over 400,000 individuals. Comfort stations, where these women were confined and exploited, sprouted across numerous locations, including Japan, China, the Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, Burma, Hong Kong, New Guinea, Malaya, Macau, and French Indochina. Women hailing from these regions, and even as far as the Netherlands and Australia, were unwillingly ensnared in this web of sexual slavery. Tragically, a significant number of the women recruited to serve in these comfort stations were underage, mere minors at the time of their captivity. The full extent of the horrors that unfolded within these walls is nearly impossible to fathom, as any documentation pertaining to the more than 125 brothels was systematically destroyed in the aftermath of the war. Moreover, political sensitivity clouded the path to a clear conversation and acknowledgement of these atrocities. The overwhelming majority of women who endured the unspeakable horrors of sexual slavery were of Chinese and Korean origin. It was not until 1993, almost 5 decades after the end of World War II, that the Japanese government finally relinquished its denial of the existence of comfort stations and acknowledged the unforgivable transgressions of the past. The realities of comfort women. The treatment endured by comfort women serves as a haunting snapshot of the abhorrent depths that war can plunge humanity into. These women's bodies became the canvas upon which unspeakable acts of anonymous sexual violence were inflicted. The brothels they were confined to were deplorable, offering little in terms of livable conditions. The testimony of a Japanese army doctor, who chillingly referred to the comfort women as public toilets, tragically encapsulates the mentality behind their treatment. Countless testimonies recount a relentless cycle of beatings and rapes that plagued these women day and night. Shockingly, even medical workers and army doctors participated in this systematic abuse, subjecting the comfort women to further violations during examinations. Some were even coerced into giving blood against their will to aid wounded soldiers. Bereft of companionship and reduced to objects of use and abuse, the comfort women had no respite from the ceaseless violation they endured. In the harrowing accounts of these women, it is not uncommon to hear of instances where they were raped as many as 30 to 40 times in a single day. When the spectre of battle loomed closer, the frequency of these horrific acts would escalate. The consequences of such relentless violence inflicted upon their bodies were devastating. A tragic amalgamation of unwanted pregnancies, venereal diseases, and infertility. As the war drew to a close, efforts to rebuild Japan did not include thorough documentation of the war crimes committed against these women. Instead, those who had been subjected to the brutality of the brothels found themselves relegated to the margins of society, ostracized and shamed. With their bodies and souls traumatized by violence and rape, many comfort women succumbed to death, while others were driven to take their own lives. It was not until 1993 that the plight of comfort women began to receive international attention. The United Nations conducted an examination of their suffering through the Global Tribunal on Violations of Women's Human Rights, estimating that by the end of World War II, a staggering 90% of comfort women had perished. The magnitude of their loss serves as a haunting reminder of the immense human toll inflicted by war and the urgent need for justice and recognition for those who endured unimaginable horrors. A haunting legacy. The legacy of the comfort stations established by Imperial Japan carries an undeniable air of haunting denial and silence. For decades, the issue remained shrouded in institutional denial, while its victims suffered in silence. It was only in the early 1990s, under mounting pressure from activists, that Japan reluctantly offered a partial admission of its involvement in coercing women into sexual slavery. This admission came in the form of the Kono Statement in 1993, marking a significant moment of acknowledgement. However, the path to reconciliation remained treacherous, with right-leaning commentators within Japan vehemently refuting these claims. The sensitive nature of the issue was palpable, as evidenced by the actions of then Education Minister Nariaki Nakayama in 2004, who sought to erase all references to comfort women from history books. The textbooks used in schools in 2005 contained no mention of their existence, further obscuring the truth. Astonishingly, in 2007, the Japanese government released a statement claiming a lack of evidence regarding the forcible seizure of women, despite having admitted to coercion 14 years earlier. The inconsistency and evasiveness of the government's stance became apparent. In 2014, the Japanese government reviewed its 1993 statement, but ultimately affirmed its commitment to it. However, there remained an out within the statement. It was drafted with the cooperation of Seoul, implying that Japan was willing to admit coercion only if pushed by external pressure. This tumultuous journey of admissions, retractions, and denials painted a disheartening picture for the survivors and their quest for justice. Their voices, often silenced and marginalized, sought nothing more than an acknowledgement of the pain they endured. The Comfort Women and their supporters longed for a sincere apology, reparations, and a full recognition of the horrors they endured. The haunted legacy of the comfort stations serves as a stark reminder of the complexities surrounding historical truths and the ongoing struggle for justice and remembrance. The survivors, carrying the weight of their past, persist in their fight for the world to acknowledge the truth of their suffering and to ensure that such atrocities are never forgotten or repeated, compensating the unimaginable. The story of the Comfort Women carries a profound lesson, one that reminds us that the sins of the past cannot be easily resolved with the passage of time. Japan, over the course of several decades, made notable efforts to address and compensate the victims, but these efforts were marred by significant complexities. In response to public pressure in 1994, the Japanese government established the Asian Women's Fund as a means of compensation for survivors. A signed apology from Prime Minister Murayama was presented to 79 Dutch, 211 Filipino, 13 Taiwanese, and 61 Korean former Comfort Women. However, the devil lay in the details. The fund, though established by the government, relied on private donations, leading survivors to view the compensation as unofficial. Initially, the Korean survivors rejected the offered compensation on principle alone. Moreover, the Asian Women's Fund faced criticism for presenting a narrative of the atrocities that aligned with the Japanese government's perspective. While eventually more than 200 women accepted the 5 million yen compensation, the underlying issues remained far from resolved. The fund was widely criticized throughout Asia as a means for the Japanese government to avoid direct responsibility. For the survivors, the fight for justice continued. In 2015, then Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of Japan and South Korea's President Park Geun-hye made concerted efforts to settle the issue once and for all. An agreement was reached, whereby Japan would pay 1 billion yen to the surviving victims, and in return, South Korea would remove a memorial dedicated to the victims from outside the Japanese embassy in Seoul and cease public criticism of Japan regarding the atrocity. With only 46 elderly Korean women remaining as survivors in 2015, this agreement was seen as a means of offering atonement. Both governments expressed relief at what they believed to be a resolution to the painful legacy of sexual slavery. They hailed it as a final and irreversible step forward. However, reality did not align with their optimistic assertions. The South Korean government, in its haste to settle the issue and alleviate the suffering of the past, had neglected to consult the will of the survivors themselves. Within days of the agreement, Korean media criticized it, highlighting the fact that it disregarded the requests and sentiments of the victims. Some former Comfort Women came forward, expressing their disinterest in financial compensation from the Japanese government. Like many victims of grave injustices around the world, they sought accountability on the part of the guilty party. The agreement failed to address the survivors' plea for Japan to admit its legal responsibility for state-sanctioned sexual slavery. It was an agreement made without the genuine support and consent of the very women it was intended to benefit this day. The issue remains unresolved, leaving a sense of dissatisfaction among many. Surviving women have resorted to legal challenges against both governments in pursuit of justice. The story of the Comfort Women serves as a poignant reminder that the path to reconciliation and redress requires genuine consultation, acknowledgement of legal responsibility, and a sincere commitment to honoring the voices and wishes of the survivors themselves. Thanks for watching the video, and if you found it informative, please like and subscribe to Time Capsule for similar content. We look forward to sharing more knowledge with you in the future. Until then, take care.